What disparities in accessibility can be identified in the current mental health services at McMaster, and how would you like to see them rectified?
I'm gonna kind of kick that off to AK, I think, and Max first, because I know you guys have a lot to say about that.
Yeah. So the first one that comes to my mind as far as what disparities exist, which I feel like is the most relatable one to at least in our side, is the lack of Black counselors for one that are available at McMaster. For people who don't know, we're actually able to go to student wellness, or we were able to go to student wellness when that was a thing. Now it's online, but you were actually able to go and seek counseling for whatever issues you may need counseling for. As a part of, like, you know what I mean, as a student, this is a service that is available to you. I have used this service a whole lot over my years here, over the latter half of my years here. And the one thing I noticed, now this is not to say that the counselors there don't do a great job. They do an absolutely fantastic job. But I feel like it would increase a certain level of comfortability, relatability, and understanding if there are more Black counselors available to us.
Yeah, to echo that, for me personally, it was just the lack of access. I didn't find anything that was, it wasn't easy for me to look up any of these like services that were specifically made for me, because I came in kind of with like a chip on my shoulder in the sense of me not feeling comfortable in my program of commerce already. And I just didn't want to associate myself with school at all. It took me until my third year for me to start integrating myself within extracurriculars and all that other stuff that you get out of university, only because I didn't feel comfortable with all of my past experiences, as well as just seeing in my program, like I didn't see very many Black people. So it was difficult for me to be able to even reach out. I thought it just wasn't here. And there wasn't anything offered for Black students specifically that I saw. So yeah, that was me.
Yeah, I'll echo definitely what Max was saying in terms of accessibility. I didn't know that we had these services until I met like Max and AK. I had no idea until they started talking about student services or student wellness. And for me, it was a bit of a shocker because I had this friend group that was diverse in my first and second years. I knew a bunch of people on campus because of my program. You know, we all tried to create a network, and never once did I hear about it. And then once I found out and went back to those groups of people, it was more about, yeah, I've always known, like you haven't known, like no one told you. And then some people would say, oh, I found out in like an office hour, or like I found out at some point in time. So I think that accessibility is a big thing. And for me, in my personal experience, the extension needs to be into faculty members if they have office hours with their students, or even like with their TAs, to take the time and just take the onus to bring it up in conversation somehow, or just let us know that these resources are available. It doesn't have to be something humongous. I think it can easily just be, well, I'm writing your paper, I'm struggling with it, this time and wrapping my head around it. And I think a lot of profs try to be like, okay, well, I will have all the answers because I teach this course and that's what it is. And sometimes we're not looking for the academic answer. We just don't know how to vocalize that we need a different answer that has to do with our mental health, and how we try to cope with how we try to cope with the things that are in front of us. And I think that, I don't know, I just personally haven't met a prof that is equipped with the ability to refer or bring it up in conversation. And I think it would really, really change the trajectory of how we as students tackle our assignments and our midterms and our exams.
Yeah, to build off of kind of what everyone said, is I agree with T. I actually also did not know until Max and AK brought it up. And like they had, actually had access. It wasn't just the fact they knew about it, just that they had accessed it. And I think that was, again, similar to Max. I also didn't really engage myself in, school activities and just being a part of the school. I kind of was just like, okay, I'm gonna go to class, gonna hang out with my friends, not on campus, do things elsewhere. And I just didn't really want to be a part of the schools. Like, I had a job, but it was just to make money, right? So it's like I didn't really want to engage, and at that, simply because I again, similar to Max, I had somewhat of a chip on my shoulder in that I always felt that I didn't have a space. Growing up in a predominantly white city, you always feel like you don't have a proper space to express your true self. So I always kept that hidden. I always had this shield up, and I always use that shield as an excuse. It's like, okay, there's probably nothing for me because I I'd experienced that there wasn't anything for me, so I'm not going to go and try and find it. because they're probably going to just be, just going to upset me every single time that I can't find something that is specific to not just my needs, but, people like me, right? So depending and, kind of leaning on friends is what worked for the first 2-3 years of my, degree. And I've built, thank God, a phenomenal, friend group, obviously, that is diverse, and, everybody has diverse experiences. So you learn from them, you obviously can ask questions, and of like, I think that's one strength that our friend group has, is that we're, we don't just, obviously joke all the time, but we have these good, serious conversations that helped. But at the same time, we definitely have talked about how there are gaps. There are significant gaps that unfortunately have mental health, and, the accessibility services to me have kind of seemed like an afterthought. It's like, oh yeah, if you're struggling, oh yeah, this is here. Oh, by the way, if you want to do this, it's like, oh, and then here's 20 other resources. It's like, where was this, in like a first year package? Where was this in like a first year orientation? Where was this on the first day of classes when I was in first year? Because the first day of classes is, all right, welcome to class. Here are your next assignments for the next 6 weeks. Nothing to deal with the fact that this is the biggest transition you will probably deal with in your life for the next 5 years. You should probably start, thinking about protecting your mental health before you even jump into this, because it's going to be a change. So I think that for me has been the biggest disparity, is just not feeling like I knew not feeling like I, that there was going to be a space, knowing that there probably wasn't going to be a space, and then not even trying to act, and then it also not kind of being reciprocated, but not really trying to reach out to us.
Yeah, I agree. And even just to kind of build in terms of a tactical sense is, it's not difficult to put these things into place. You know what I mean? Like, it's easy to be in your first year, and for first year reps to be like, okay, there's a student wellness center. This is where you can go for such and such and such. When I was in first year, nobody told me that. You know what I mean? And that is, in my opinion, should be one of the first things we hear as students. We're coming into a brand new environment, new people, new way of studying, new way of life. It should be one of the first, exactly, it should be one of the first things that you hear. And I didn't hear about it till like 3rd, 4th year. By that time, I had already had my own coping mechanisms that probably weren't healthy to deal with whatever mental health issues that I was going through at the time. And so the Student Wellness Center, or the resources that Mac had, were just pushed in the back of my head as, okay, well, I'll tell other people now because I'm stuck in my ways. But in terms of just getting the job done, it's not difficult. You know what I mean? You tell your first year reps, make this a priority in terms of what you tell your students. Boom, first year, done. Like, in terms of training staff to know what to say and how to say it, those programs are there because as Black student mentors in the Black student mentorship program, it's required as the training that we as students have to go through to speak to our mentees. So it's there, it's accessible because we have to do it, but no one apparently did it to tell us.
Right.
And that's the problem. So these are things that are tangible. They can be put into work. They can be achieved. It just seems like it's not being done, or people think it's too many steps to achieve it. And it's really, really not, because the reason for our extended break over winter break was mental health. And we just did that on the flash, and every single prof had to rearrange their courses.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not that serious.
But on the flip side, unfortunately, that has resulted in now a scramble for the end of the semester, which will mess up a bunch of us. So at the end of the day, it's like, were you really thinking about us properly when you did that? Because they just said, we're just going to shove it over and then force your exams into 2 weeks. And I think that's like what we'll kind of get into this later, but not necessarily performative action, but kind of just like, we're going to make it seem like we're really helping you. But at the end of the day, it didn't help anybody. It just made things worse for both. Now professors are, can get cynical about it just because it's like, okay, you've messed up the whole semester. And now students, when we get to the end of the semester, like, wait, what the heck? I have, what we normally have 3-4 weeks to do, we have 2 weeks to do. So like, it's just, it's small things like that if you're going to give people, a break and you're going to claim it's for mental health, really consider how you're going about it. Because if you truly cared about mental health for students, you would consider how this would affect them later on. A week in university is 2 months in high school. It's a whole lot. So you can't play around with, a couple days of university and just think that, oh yeah, a week will be fine. They'll figure it out. You have to consider that when you're, especially more when you're dealing with 4 months at a time.
I have a point to add on. I think for me, I'm just thinking back to my first year now. Like, I think for me, walking around campus, I was an off-campus student. So I think that also played a part in me not necessarily integrating myself in school. But what would have helped if I saw more representation for me, seeing older Black figures around campus, whether that be profs or, again, like counselors. And one thing I remember, I remember a few years ago when we were reps when we were green suits, and we just saw two Black first years, two guys, right?
Yeah.
And I looked at them and I said, I'm like, let's just walk up to them and just say what's up. Like, we don't know what program we're just gonna, because that's what we had to do anyways, right? But I looked at them and I'm like, you guys are from Hamilton, like you guys are on res. They're like, yeah. I'm like, y'all want a barber? They're like, oh my God, yes. And I'm thinking, I'm like, just these little things that Black people, like these little things that can help us, just the little things, right? In terms of having a barber and not being like AK and having to go 2 hours to Vaughan just for a haircut in first year. You know what I mean? Just these little things to help us out. Yeah, so those are just little things that I thought of. It's for us, and now like I feel like more so the community is a little bit more integrated, us specifically, with all the initiatives that have been happening, especially after this summer with BLM and just trying to be at the forefront of the school. And I feel like that's our job, and we will continue like leaving our impact. So our whole point is for us to be able to have a lasting impact on the first generation students, like first generation Black students coming in, just so they can reap the benefits that we necessarily didn't have.
And you saying that reminded me of, because you guys are talking about the transition, right? Like Makena was talking about from high school to university, and how that's one of the biggest transitions you'll probably experience in that 4 or 5 year period. It's something that we don't really look at. Like, it's not something that we actually break down, but that jump for a lot of us as a Black person, that jump for you, especially in this country that we live in, that jump is very, very, very severe, and there's no break. So this is what I mean by that. For students that are coming from predominantly Black areas, you are now shoved into a place of academia where Blackness is not the first face that you see. So you're immediately plucked out of an environment where you're very, very comfortable and thrown into this academic setting with white students and all those type of students. And that's not to demonize these type of students, obviously. I mean, nobody comes into school and thinks, let me make life hard for Black people. That's not what anybody's doing. But as Black people that are in predominantly Black areas are plucked out and thrown into this area where there's nobody that really looks like them. And that's a really, really jarring jump. On top of that, then there's the academic jump. You know what I mean? And the academic jump is something you only have to live with in academic settings, but that culture jump, that where I lay my head and who's living around me jump is massive. And there's no immediate brace for that. On the flip side, Black students who are coming from predominantly white areas, a lot of us have been able to come here and find homes, but a lot of that is by sheer luck. There are a lot of Black students in white areas that come over here and realize, wow, this is just, I came here looking for some sense of community, some sense of understanding, some sense of people that can see things the way I see things, some sense of people who understand my struggles, and they get here and realize, wow, there's really none of that. And it's something that you really have to dig deep and look for. So like, there's no real brace, no cushion, no safety net for us when you're plucking somebody out of an environment where white students may not have to worry about, are there going to be white people there? But for us, that identity is so important to us. And it's not important to us because we choose it to be. It's important to us because society has chosen it to be important to us.
Agreed. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's it.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off at all. I was just going to say, how you're saying, you have Black students who come from predominantly white areas in high school. That is Mac and I. Yeah. I think I knew like 4 Black people in total in like our city of Oakville, like in total, maybe 4 or 5. So going to university, I was already prepared to feel insecure about my Blackness. I was already prepared to be on edge. Anxiety was always at an all-time high. And for me, the experience, and this kind of ties into the third question, I'm sorry, so I'll make it short and sweet, but my experience was being the only Black person in my friend group in first year. And everyone else was either not a person of color or was a person of color but wasn't Black. And there was this era of racial slurs like the N-word, and it was just used freely. And for me at the time, being the only Black person, especially being a Black woman, I was not prepared to speak up. I was not prepared to say, stop doing that, because I had no other network. I had no other community other than these people who, okay, well, I've seen other Black people in media or other Black people online or on the TV act the way I do. And so were these people. So maybe I can feel secure in that, and maybe they're doing the right thing. And it ties into the question of allyship of, if you're truly understanding what an ally is, it's not trying to be me to understand me. It's trying to respect and support me without trying to be me. And for me, that just wasn't there in terms of my friends. And I never, ever saw it in terms of professors, in terms of TAs, in terms of anything like that. It was always, let me as a non-Black person teach you about the Black experience so that you can write a midterm about it. And I'm sitting here writing down my own trauma for you to grade, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But here we are.
Hit the nail on the head. Hit the nail directly on the head.
Yeah. I don't know. Next question, maybe? Do you guys have anything more to say?
I think we can kind of, yeah, because I feel like we're kind of jumping to the third one. So I feel like we can get to the second question.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I just want to say those have been really eye-opening answers so far. So thank you. You guys are doing, I'm so excited. Okay. Yeah, okay, there definitely needs to be like more transparency and support and like conscious action. But yeah, okay. So before we also move on to our next question, I just want to say to our audience members, I think it might be helpful to like have their cameras on. Obviously, don't unmute yourself, but maybe it will like make everyone feel a bit more comfortable. So if you want to turn your camera on, please go ahead. Your faces won't be recorded, by the way. It's just the speakers that are being pinned. So just they are being recorded. And yeah, so I'll just move on to our next question then. So the second question is, what should be requirements for educators and school leaders for dealing with anti-Black racism and its impact on Black students' mental health?
I'm going to start.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
So since I started at McMaster, and I'm going to tread somewhat carefully here, not completely.
Wait, can we do the disclaimer now of this is a very candid discussion, and
Yes.
we feel comfortable in this space.
Yes.
So we also want you as the audience to feel comfortable to bring up questions to us, or even like if you have a comment that opposes what we said because you've had a different experience, like this is meant to be a very
Yes.
safe space. That's what our clubs are.
Yes.
That are hosting, so feel free, and we will be doing the same. We'll be transparent.
And additionally, just because we're recording doesn't mean that this all has to get posted. If you are uncomfortable with something getting posted and you do want to speak, please do reach out to anybody at Coper or Black Space, and we'll probably be doing some editing anyway. So just a disclaimer, because we really, really want to have a good discussion with people.
I felt the energy shift.
Yeah.
So
yeah, this question is it's a bit much. Not like in a bad way, but it's like there's gonna be some answers. So in my 4 years now at McMaster, I've been involved in the school in different capacities. There are some microaggressions. There are some just, I'm not, obviously there's a difference between a microaggression and a very blatant form of racism, right? Like you have, actual slurs versus you have things, just offhanded comments like, how do you wash your hair? How did your hair grow so quickly? And because I don't know if anybody knows me well, I change my hair like every semester, at least twice, and it's never the same thing. So obviously, I'll come with an afro one day, I'll have my braids the next day, and obviously there's a length difference there. So being asked, how do you wash your hair? Or do you wash your hair is not the greatest question. It's also like, it's a shocking question, especially when you hear it multiple times in one day. It's like, I don't understand why we're talking about washing my hair in a workplace. I came here to work.
Are we in a salon?
And even then, I'm not paying you to do my hair. So I think, and I'm not even gonna get into the other comments, but that specifically, because I heard that often. I think things like that were very upsetting to me, and kind of as much as I was trying, and obviously working on kind of coming out of my shell and coming out of this, space of feeling like I don't belong somewhere, it was difficult when it's like every time I tried to be, because in high school, I rarely switched my hair up. I always tried to do the same thing. I tried to keep it consistent so that I didn't deal with those comments. But then I got to university, came up on some money, and was like, I want to get my hair done. I want to get my braids done. And I was doing different colors, look.
Yup.
And dressing different as well. Like I started dressing like, how, like my authentic self rather than trying to cover up. So I was really stepping into you know, what I am today. Like I wouldn't even have had nails like this in first year, right? But stepping into that, but then also, you know, have like every single time I feel I'm stepping more and more into myself, I get all these questions that kind of attack that in a way, whether it's subtly or, you know, overtly. And it's like, okay, so what's the point of me coming out of my shell if every space I go into, these are the people that are dominating the space, that are employing me, that are teaching me, that are, you know, my peers? What's like, it's everywhere you turn, it's like, okay, do I want to be who I am in this space, or am I going to tone it down here, you know? And realistically, the toning down, and I'm sure everyone's going to have something to say about this in every single part of this, toning down is the most frustrating thing that we as Black people have to go through, because we have to do it in so many different regards, and especially in mental health, because Black people are consistently, especially in the medical fields, are consistently told that we, you know, it just, oh, you'll be fine, it's just a headache, oh, you'll be fine, it's just this, oh, you'll be fine, it's just that, take some Advil, go home. Meanwhile, it turns out to be significantly worse situations, and I personally had one a year ago. And mental health especially isn't talked about as much in the Black community, because it's one of those things that not only within the Black community but external to the Black community, it's just kind of a taboo thing. It's kind of like, okay, how can you really be, you know, how can you really have this problem, how can you really have anxiety, how can you really have this? So not only do some people not feel safe in their own community, but when they go out and they're consistently not allowed to be who they are, it's a double vendetta. This, you know, it's like, okay, I can't be myself, and I can't really express this to people, you know, back home or whatever. And now I can't even express myself, you know, in these public spaces. So I think when talking about requirements, I think there are certain trainings that should be required. For one, like some of us are student mentors with the Black Student Mentorship Program, and I really appreciated that they had very, very thorough training on mental health specifically, on disabilities specifically as well, that weren't just kind of like, okay, here's some slides, have fun. They had us go through actual programs as well as completing their own slides, and that was eye-opening, because I hadn't seen that, and I work for a campus service, and I've never once done training like that. It's just those standard things you do at a grocery store. Click some questions for 3 hours, and we'll pay you, go home, come back, start your training, right? So I feel like if I'm not getting trained to do that as a campus service, what are they truly getting trained to do as, you know, working, especially at such a diverse university, Because as much as obviously there's a majority at McMaster, it's better than some other schools. Like if you go to Western or Queens, it's significantly worse in terms of the percentages, right? So McMaster can be considered a diverse school, which means you have to have staff members who are prepared for the diversity. And I just haven't felt that at all. So I think for me, training specifically, and ongoing training, not just once at the beginning of your career.
Right.
Multiple times.
Agreed. I agree wholeheartedly with what you said, and I feel like the Black women on this call can very, very closely relate to comments about hair, or comments about, well, it's just hair, which is another discussion in itself. But you brought up a topic about mental health not being discussed as much as in the Black community, and my personal understanding for that is historically we have had to be a race that had to be strong, or else we would have been gone by now. We had to be strong. We had to persevere. We had to push through things. And that need for strength has materialized into the makeup of being Black in a sense. And it's an unfortunate thing because it seeps into every other possible intersectional aspect of being Black. You also have to be strong. You can be Black in this, but make sure you're strong too. You can be Black in this, but make sure you're strong too. And it's very, very, very easily, it's very easily seeped into mental health as well. I have dealt with my own mental health experiences where it was difficult for even my own parents to sit down and listen to what I was saying to them. You know, I have a relationship with my parents now where it's an open discussion. If I'm feeling a certain way, I'll tell them and we'll have the discussion. But to get there, it took years of even just understanding what it meant to struggle with depression while also, you know, having an education. Things like, you have an education, you have a great education, you're at a great school. Why do need to be sad? Why are you struggling? Those are the questions that come up all the time. And for us as students in this generation, it's easy to be like, what do you mean, why am I struggling? Like, we know the answers, but it's difficult sometimes because the people who came before us don't. So mental health in the Black community, I agree with you, Mac, has been something that isn't often talked about. And I think that our own lack of discussion has really, really provided a mirror for everybody else that's external to also not really focus on it. And I'm not saying that it's our fault. I'm not saying it's anybody else's fault. It's just what happens. It's kind of like, what's it called? Is it called operant conditioning, where like you observe something? Is that what it is? I don't know. Something like that.
So, I don't know about all that, but I need
I hate you, bro. I hate you, bro. But yeah, I just think that it's kind of like monkey see, monkey do. If it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck.
Act like a duck.
You know what I mean? So for me, it's the requirement for educators and school leaders is, if you are going to have a single lecture, a single class, a single discussion, an office hour that has to do with being Black in any capacity, if you're teaching it, if you're talking to a student about what's actually happening in their life at that time, you need to, before you embark on any of those discussions, you have to have a place to go to reference what you're going to say. You can't just speak from the heart, because it's a completely different discussion. So I know that right now, you know, Mac is working on a Black student athlete committee so that people in the faculty and students have a place to turn to say, okay, I can't just make this judgment call. I have to see how it compares to what Black people actually feel. And I think that that needs to manifest across the campus. It needs to be something that happens, because I know one Black professor, a singular one. So that means the majority of our professors, the majority of people, I see you. Okay, see what I mean? Great stuff. That's the stuff we love. So it means that the majority of our leaders are kind of just doing things on a whim of textbook and what they've read and thinking, okay, well, I'm just giving you the facts. I hear that a lot. Don't get mad at me. I'm just the messenger. I'm just giving you the facts. And that, again, I said this yesterday to you guys, but I think that people need to understand that for us, it's trauma. For them, it can be just quota. And it's not the same thing. So I think that reference point, like what Kwasi said, is being worked on right now, and for the athletics department, those are huge things that are going to make a big difference in how our educators and our leaders address the Black student population, or even their own colleagues. And I think that'll make a big difference, because sometimes we just speak from the head and not really taking what we're saying, and that goes for everybody across the board. And it's good to have reference points. It's good to change your opinions. It's good to change your understandings, because it means that you're growing, and I think it's necessary in our student body.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, to kind of piggyback off what Tamia just said, and this point is entirely going to be about the professors. It's taken me a while to figure out how to put these into words without coming off as very, very angry and volatile. But so it's taken me a long time to figure out how to put this into words without coming off very, very angry and volatile. And it comes down to this. As a professor, you're an academic. Your entirety of your job, your job is to teach and to fully educate. You're an educator. Along with the role of an educator, I myself was an educator for a number of years while I was at this school. That was my job. Part of the role of an educator is to be able to educate more than one type of student, and to be able to educate more than one type of person for more than one type of background with more than one type of circumstances. A lot of times in academia, people do look at it as this, like Tamia was saying, facts versus feelings situation. And professors tend to lead towards I'm just here to teach the material. But the problem is, when you are teaching the material, you're not understanding that every single student that comes into your class has their own particular set of circumstances that they're observing your material through. Everyone has a particular lens. So what you have to do, and that's part of the job of being an educator, and avoiding this job, in my opinion, is just quite frankly lazy. But I think a large part of what you have to do is tailor your material to the audience you're teaching it to. For example, if when I was I work with the school board at Hamilton for a number of years. Teaching a class of grade 7s is different than teaching a class of grade 12s. And that distinction is something that people are able to make casually, no problem, understand. Age-wise, it makes absolute sense. You don't look at these two people the same. When it now becomes a barrier of race, for some reason, it becomes blurred, and it starts looking at it more as, oh, maybe this is an emotional thing. Get over your feelings, get over this, get over that. But the fact of the matter is, Black students are observing the course material in a very, very different way than all other students are taking it in. That's just point blank, period. Now, in courses that are maybe math courses, those type of courses, these things are still there, but it's a little less blatant. When you look at courses that are more anthropology, psychology, philosophy, poli-sci, these courses are courses that look at the human condition. You're looking at the world around you. And if you're teaching your students about the world around you, you need to be able to teach about the world around you in the scope that is, number one, wide. It doesn't have to be all encompassing because no one can do that, but as wide as you can get to. If I'm taking an anthropology course, there's no reason that the professor should be teaching about a whole bunch of different cultures around the world and only speaking negatively about the Black cultures, the African cultures. You see what I mean? And looking at it as barbaric and uncivilized and this, that, and the third. I think that the entirety of that responsibility falls on the educator. I think trying to avoid that is a sign of laziness. I think trying to avoid that is a sign of disservice to your students and also a sign of disservice to yourself. Talk about it, man. I ain't gonna say nothing. Talk about it. But you know, like as an educator, they are in a position. Your job, yeah, you may have your research stuff you're doing, but your job is to teach me. So if your job is to teach me, your job is to teach me as well as everything I come along with. Yeah, I have to make some adjustment in order to get good grades, whatever. But a big part of your job is to teach me according to how I can learn, and Max according to how he can learn, and Tia according to how she can learn, and Mac according to how she can learn, and Brenda according to how she can learn. You have to teach according to who you're teaching to. Everything has, especially in this part of the world, I'm like going on like a whole thing right now, but
I love it.
Go ahead.
But everything, especially in this part of the world with the history that we have in this part of the world, every single field of academia has something that has to do with culture. And culture is a huge barrier in a lot of ways. Like I was saying before, students that are coming from predominantly Black areas, maybe low-income areas, even if they're coming into math programs, there's an expectation that you have to be on the exact same level as this student who had STEM courses, who had these type of courses. Their teachers have been doing X, Y, and Z. They've been prepped. As somebody who went to private school, I got here and realized I'm equipped with some tools that other students are not equipped with, fresh out of high school, and we're in the same program. You know what I mean? So I think the entirety of that falls on educators have to do a better job teaching their students. Absolutely the Black students, but even beyond that, just putting in the extra effort to properly educate your students based on whatever their background may be. That's the end.
Are you gonna tell the story?
No.
No. I was ready to.
You brought up a story and you're not gonna tell the
I'm
story.
not gonna tell the story.
You're not gonna tell the story? Not even briefly?
Uh-oh.
All right.
Max.
Y'all want me to speak after you?
Yes, Max.
I'm sorry.
Eloquent people.
I lyrical spiritual miracle.
You lyrical spiritual miracle individual. Listen, for me personally, I just want to know why I haven't been approached by anybody in my faculty on what I feel.
Sorry.
I just want to know my faculty. I'm gonna talk my S. So I'm the only Black leader in the group. And throughout everything that has happened throughout the summer, etc., I did not get consulted by one person about how I felt or what I feel like could improve the faculty or my experience. Again, just echoing what AK said, it's just laziness. They just don't put in the effort to do so. I'm truly conflicted because I also held I'm gonna go in, but anyways, I also held a panel for Welcome Week for Black students coming in, and I expected a little bit more support out of my faculty, especially how I'm literally doing them a favor by me bringing other people on, bringing up their trauma and what they do to deal with it, kind of like how we're doing right now. And I hear some.
We
good. Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So, yeah, and them bringing up their trauma and stuff like that to help them. And not once did I get offered any support. Not once did I get a thank you or an acknowledgement or anything like that. I had to push everything on my own. And from that, I realized my school failed me. They had the perfect opportunity, and we're going to get into performative actions and stuff like that. They had the perfect opportunity to even not seem performative, and they just decided not to take that. And that is my experience. A lot of people around me know how I feel, and that's kind of how I end it. Like, my university and my school failed me. And if anybody asks me that question, like, I'm literally just going to be real about that. So.
And I'm just, before we kind of get on to the last question, I appreciate Max bringing that up. I think I just wanted to highlight this. And this isn't just to say, okay, yeah, things suck, but we've done this. I wanted to highlight this to celebrate what we've done this year. This past year, in many different regards, has been one of the best years for Black students. Also one of the worst years, but one of the best years for Black students, because I literally have not felt this much presence of Black clubs, you know, the Black athletes especially kind of led the charge. And it has been one of the best experiences, regardless of the fact that we can't all, you know, be together, you know, physically, but even just online, the presence of these Black clubs has been felt. We have made, you know, Black Space, I mean, speak specifically on Black Space, we have held over 15 events by the time the year will be done. We have had a tremendous response, tremendous outreach from other people who have recognized, not just within the McMaster community, but outside, who recognize what we're doing just off of the strength of us being consistent, being engaging, and remaining out there. And even all the other Black clubs, especially, and the new ones, the number of new clubs that have come up. Black Student Mentorship Program was one of the best opportunities for first years. It was an absolutely amazing thing. We kicked it off with, of course, Max had his panel that was obviously titled as a BIPOC panel. We talked about Black student experiences. And I feel like just and then of course, on top of all of that, you have the athletic review that was led obviously by the Black students, which I feel like led this incredible charge into a year that has been so transformative for our, you know, the Black community at McMaster. And I think it's important that this, I don't know what's the word, this drive, this, you know, adrenaline does not die down, because, you know, as much as, you know, things obviously have changed, they haven't all changed yet. You know, we can't just settle in small victories. We got to keep going when there's more to be done. And as much as, you know, obviously the four of us are graduating and we're not going to be at McMaster, you know, as students, obviously we'll still be in the community. Just
I'm coming back.
Yeah, just because of the ties. I think it's important that we've left a legacy. We've left a very important legacy. We've left what the four of us didn't have. The four of us, all the experiences we've talked about, we've left a change for all of these people, and all four of us have done it our own way, and I'm very appreciative. And we're not the only ones. Even people in this chat right now, so many other students have contributed to this. So I just wanted to highlight that in terms of, you know, kind of what students have done to bridge the gap where the school has failed us, like Max said.
Bridging the gap. I just want to end off this question by showing the difference that it makes when our educators and when our leaders allow us and understand us as Black students, and the excellence that comes from that, not just within the Black community, but for our university as a whole. Last year, I was able to be part of Mac Africans' Black Expo, and it was in person. And I distinctly remember, one, the student response, because it was in Student Center, and, you know, there was music playing, and there was this big event. It got approved. We were allowed to do this. And I just remember there was like a whole Facebook page or thread of just students at Mac to celebrate excellence. And it's like, damn, it was even during Black History Month. And I distinctly remember somebody who worked at the university coming downstairs in Student Center. She came downstairs, and she wasn't a person of color. And she came up to us and said, if you don't shut this down, I'm going to have it shut down. You're way too loud. And there's that. And it kind of dampened, you know, our feeling of freedom, our feeling of, we can do this. This is our community. We can feel comfortable here. And we couldn't. We had to feel defensive. We had to feel, no, we have to keep holding on to this. We had to feel like we had to grasp in the span of like 3 hours, in 4 hours. That is what happened. And just the contrast, all of the evidence that Mac gave this year, when none of that happened anymore, when people were forced to look at the Black community with more respect, we're forced to hear our stories, we're forced to have awareness. You cannot claim ignorance anymore. It's not possible. I don't care if you don't own a phone or a TV or a laptop. When you left your house and you went to the GO station, the gas station, there are magazines, TV screens, anything, people in the corner talking about it. You cannot claim the ignorance. And just that presence, the ability for our educators and our leaders to say, okay, no, we have to take a step back and look at this, has allowed us to flourish. It has allowed our Mac community to feel somewhere comfortable for the very first time where I feel like me. So in 5 years, it's the first time I feel like me. Yeah. And that is the evidence right there. When we change how we view things, our educators and our leaders, how they change how they view things and how they act, and it allows us to flourish, the university itself flourishes. It becomes an actual campus community. And I think the evidence, the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the pudding, 100%. Sorry.
I think that the fact that you said you can no longer feign ignorance is that's a put that on a headband or something. Because it's you would think in a space where people are so devoted to understanding and learning and developing themselves and expanding their minds that, you know, that they would come in looking to improve and looking to understand and looking to grow. And McMaster is somehow over the last, and I can really only speak for the 5 years I've been here, but McMaster has somehow managed to allow people to skate by and only pretend to be interested to a certain extent and call themselves somebody who's seeking higher learning without actually putting that work in. And granted, we're gonna graduate and we're gonna be gone, but for the people who are still here, I know Makena said she doesn't want the fire to die down, and that's absolutely something that we want. We want you guys to stay motivated, and we want you guys to be on top of everything. But when we're gone, do not hesitate to reach out to us to ask for help too.
That
like, when we're out of here, do not hesitate. Like, do not feel bad asking us, how do I do this? Yeah. Like, the reason we're doing this in the same way that our parents' generation and our grandparents' generation had to fight for particular things, so we don't have to anymore. We've endured a whole lot of stuff, and we're here to give you guys the keys so you don't have to go through the same things we went through. You know, exactly. So never, ever, ever hesitate to come to us. We're literally here. None of us will ever deny you. I promise you.
Agreed. And just evidence of that again, because we're backing up what we say with evidence. Intro point, evidence. We literally had a Black woman who was Mac alum, who started her own community and network outside of McMaster because she didn't feel like it was there, reach out to us as Black space and say, I'm so happy you're doing this. I didn't have this. Thank you for doing this. So there are people who are in your alum network who want to see this happen, who will support you. Proof's in the pudding.
It's in the pudding. Now I think we should get to the third question so that we have time for questions afterwards.
Agree.
Yeah, and thank you guys for all of that. This last question is also going to move into the open discussion. So I will go ahead and put this in the chat. It's how can student groups, as well as McMaster as an institution, better advocate for the mental health needs of Black students? And then more specifically, how can students on an individual level be better allies?
Are we
gonna, because we are the club.
Y'all,
yes, Do you want me to go?
I started the last
Okay.
Floor's yours.
Damn. I decided to do this one off the top. So yeah. I'm gonna just off the top. Okay, so I'm gonna start off my answer with a quote that I heard at I think it's sweet. With a quote that I heard at another panel, and it was I forgot. It was a Black History Month panel hosted by the athletics department. I forget the name of it. But one of the panelists, her name is Janelle St. Aubin. She said, and I wrote it down as soon as I heard it, everyone loves the title ally, but if the allyship isn't challenging you or costing you something, are you really understanding and being an ally? And I wrote it down as soon as I heard it, because too often, You either, as a Black person, get the message directly to your face or in your messages, or it's an infographic of, I'm not Black, but I see you.
Oh God.
Well, I'd hope so. Been here the whole time.
Right.
I'm not Black, but I hear you. Well, I hope so. I've been talking the whole time. So the thing about allyship and advocating for mental health needs, not even just of the Black community, just in general, is we have to simply open our eyes and ears. We have the ability now to filter what we see, what we say in our lives, and proof in the pudding. When you go online shopping, what's the thing you can do for the selection? Filter. Proof in the pudding. We can choose what we want to hear. We can choose what we want to see. That has led to a tone deaf society. We do not pay attention to things that we just feel make us uncomfortable. And that has created a space for inequality, a space for violence to progress. And it can be seen simply by, and this is always something traumatic to talk about, but George Floyd. We as the Black community have been tirelessly for years on end talking about police brutality, not only in America, also here in Canada, across the world. It has been something that has always been said. We haven't been quiet, but no one was able to filter out what happened to George Floyd. It took over the airwaves. Everyone was forced to finally say, okay, I see and heard what happened. This is, I have to now address this problem. And look at the outpour from different countries, from different institutions, from different corporations. I think that when we're able to sit back and say, my opinion might be wrong, my viewpoint might not be all encompassing, when we take in information and we try to at least put ourselves in the other shoes, in the shoes of the person who we aren't, some progress or some growth is made. When you take yourself out of your comfort zone, actively take yourself out of your comfort zone and try to understand something that you haven't understood before, you're automatically growing. Automatically growing. So that goes for individuals and it goes for our student groups. We are so focused on our goal as student groups because we have to get it like approved by the MSU, and it's perfect. We should focus on that. But what we also need to understand is we are not our own bodies. We are in a community, and we've created our group so that we can find community within community, which forces us to acknowledge everyone around us. We have to do it. So in terms of our student groups, in terms of our institution, how can we better advocate? Please, for the love of God, just listen and look. Listen and look. We've been talking the whole time. The whole time. We've been saying it the whole time. We've been struggling the whole time. Now that you've been forced to hear, now that you've been forced to see, you know that there's action to be taken. So for me, it's not a big end all be all action of, okay, this is what we need to do in our group. We have to have this every student meeting that we talk about what has a Black person gone through. That's not necessary. You don't have to do that, in my opinion. You know, the other panelists might feel differently, but in my opinion, you don't have to do that. What it comes to is you as an individual, when you see something that is discriminatory towards somebody, they don't even have to be Black, just discriminatory in general. Don't shy away from it. Don't hide and think, well, it might not be my business, or I don't know what the backlash is going to be on me. You have actively decided not to step out of your comfort zone. You've actively decided to be complicit because you have not stood up. So those little choices that we make on a daily basis to be better, to push ourselves, to come out of our comfort zones, they will automatically seep into what we do in an academic setting and in our other relationships. So us as co-presidents, no, we do not have something in our constitution that says, okay, we have to acknowledge disparities and discrimination in our campus every meeting. No, we make these decisions as people. Our team makes these decisions as people. And when we come together, it flourishes and it blossoms. And that's really all it takes. I went off, but go ahead.
She went off. And I think this specific question we definitely talked about. We had our meeting, we talked about these, but I think her answer is literally what I was going to talk about is the last summer, especially, was very difficult for men. I'm going to bring it back to mental health specifically, because and I'm going to do this simply because of our experience. T and I, or Tamia, sorry, okay, T and I don't call her by her full name. No one calls me by my full name. Sorry. So T and I took over Black Space around the middle end of April. And of course, we took it over when we were in lockdown, so we were doing this whole shift virtually, and we were just hiring reps and getting into, start like settling and kind of reshaping the club for the virtual semester when the George Floyd Black Lives Matter situation kicked off. And it was the most difficult 3-week period for both of us, because not only were we both working full time, we had just hired executives. We were just trying to figure out, the inner workings of how to run a club, because there's really no rule book. There's not a rule book, but there's no, set way to do it. There's no instructions. And having to deal with, when you are a Black club, you are, obviously that's what you stand for, having to deal with the height of a social issue in the Black community while stepping into a new role in a pandemic as a full-time worker was the most difficult situation. I broke down on a daily basis for 2 weeks straight because there was just I didn't have an outlet, because my outlet was going to social media to laugh, but every time I went on social media, it's people who look like me, who were crying, who were in the streets marching in a pandemic with masks, right? At home, the conversations we have, that's just what everything comes back to. And I think it was so important for what we talked about in my home was that, specifically for white families, they can shut this off. They can go march, for 2 hours in the streets, come home and have a nice family dinner, and, not have to really discuss this, because it's not something that affects their every single part of their daily, workings, unless they are an ally, of course, and I'll get into that. But for us as a Black family, we can't turn that off. We can't turn off this, every time we turn on the news, we see this, but it's like, those are my people. My brother is a Black male. It could have easily been my brother in one of those situations. My brother could have been Ahmaud Arbery. My brother could have been so many of those people, and so could have Max and AK, and so we could have been Breonna Taylor, And it's just so difficult for us to sit here on a daily basis. And for, like T said, we've been talking. I have been forced to talk since I could and stand up for myself in many different ways. I have been forced to not share my story, but to, be overtly aware of my Blackness. My mother has had to teach me that, to be overtly aware, to not because she is ashamed of me, but to kind of cover up my, my identity, just so that I don't offend people, right? So when we're going into a situation like what happened last summer, for us, it's not, people are kind of like, so people's heads are turning. It's like, this is new for them. This isn't new for the Black community. So for people to start acting like it's new, it's very difficult for us, because it's like, I can't sit here and try and teach you what's going on, because it's been happening. You just, like T said, chose to filter it out and not focus on it. So I think for student groups specifically, last summer was kind of like, oh my goodness, everything that we have, all of the reason our clubs exist is now coming to the forefront in a very, very aggressive and very quick way. And I think it was so important for us in that time to just kind of, I weekly posted this, was just take time for yourselves, Black people, because that was so, when you have all of this, negative energy around, just people, obviously there was people negating the whole situation, and then you have people political talk pieces talking all of this nonsense about things. It's so difficult when you're trying to absorb everything so that you remain in the know, to actually take care of yourself, to actually remember that you have your own mental state as well to worry about, and sometimes we feel that we aren't allowed to be a bit selfish. But last summer I had to learn to be selfish, because I was spiraling very quickly. Every single day I'd wake up, work, okay, do this, get involved in this, Black space, what are we doing next to figure this out, right? And it just, I was so focused on trying to speak up for my people and trying to be a representative as, we'd stepped into that role, that I was not at all taking care of myself. And I think student groups on campus should recognize that. And we definitely appreciate when student groups reach out like COPE, when they reach out with genuine intentions, when they reach out not just because they want to put us on a poster and be like, cool, this is a Black club that we've done this with. When they reach out and they genuinely interested on not only giving us a platform, but also in what we have to say and encouraging the conversation, and it being not just, we want you guys to speak to our members, we want to have this with your members as well. We want to come together collectively, because we have certainly had our fair share of performative people come through our email inbox, come through our DMs, and I'm not going to name names because
Please
I'm not
don't.
going to shake that up.
I was like, where is she going with that?
I'm not going to do that. We have our fair share of it, and it was at its height, especially in July. It was bad, and it was like, and we can all tell. I mean, after a while, you can just tell certain language, like, okay, you don't mean that.
You was about to quote.
You wasn't saying, yeah, don't do that. You wasn't saying that, a month ago. Where was this energy? Literally a week and a half ago. So I think, especially for student clubs, I think coming to Black student clubs, specifically Black student clubs, but also different clubs of the diverse community. Not in this way that's like, we just kind of want to have you as, the what's that thing, the token Black person. Don't come to us to be a token, come to us to be collaborative. And again, I'm going to highlight Cope for this, because we talked about this with T. We really appreciated the way Cope came to us.
Exactly.
We really appreciated it, and we were very careful.
Love you guys.
Love you so much. Because when we were bringing this to the other clubs, we were like, we want to make sure that the other clubs understand that this was not a this wasn't a performative thing, because that again, we talked about this with Brenda and Cynthia when we were sending the invite out, was that we don't want the other clubs to, because that's just kind of the guard we all have as Black clubs. Okay, is this performative? Is this them just kind of wanting us to just be there? And so we wanted to make sure that they understood, because when we had the meeting with Brenda and Cynthia, the genuinity came through. It was very obvious that they had very genuine intentions from the jump, and that has been one of the best opportunities for us to put together. It has been an enjoyable experience, and that is, oh goodness, and that is exactly what being an ally means, is regardless of what people might think, regardless of kind of what your club's themes have been, reaching out to a Black club, not just to throw on a poster and say, oh, we talked to them, cool, but to have a discussion with them, to invite them, to seek their input at every single stage, as Brenda and Cynthia did with us, is exactly what it means to be an ally, because you are reaching out, you are asking for their voice, not just to educate yourself, but because you want to, first of all, share a platform, not just give a platform, but share a platform, and also give other people in both communities more information.
Before we hand it off to Max and AK, the only reason you need tokens is to play games, so don't do it.
Bars! You're a rapper, bro. Bars! I mean, bars! I just have a 1-2 to say about this, because a few things, like microaggressions is one of those words that just I didn't necessarily understand until someone explained it properly to me, because I just thought of it as someone just demeaning me, or just not taking into account, like, or just being ignorant, you know what I mean? But it's far worse than that. It's blatant racism. I thought of this one thing the other day. I was literally like, bro, if you're trying to have like fun conversation with me, if you gotta think twice about what you are about to say, don't say it. Just don't say it. Just be a nice person. Ask me how my day is. Don't make a comment to try to relate to me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just you know what I mean? And one more point about this, because you both hit all the points. Talk to your parents. Try to have a conversation with them and see where their heads are at on how you feel. And don't be afraid. Again, if you are an ally, one of the things that you are afraid to compromise is like situations with your parents and how they may get uncomfortable with certain situations. And that's a huge way to try to ruffle some feathers and actually understand where your parents may be and how you feel, like, because everybody got brought up. You got brought up saying these microaggressions. Like it most likely came from them or your environment. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's pretty much me.
Yeah. So what I'm gonna say applies to both student groups and faculty better supporting us as far as mental health goes, and allyship. I don't know how to say it any other way. Stop being inflexible and stop trying to contain growth under whatever ceiling you want to operate under. If it's supposed to be uncomfortable, if you really, really break it down to what it is, it's just I've seen far too often at the school, and this happens every single time. Oh my bad, hello. It happens far too often at the school, and this happens every single time. This happens every single time. Serious large-scale change or reform is attempted. The powers that be try to mold it under some certain category because in their brain, their job is keeping the peace, but keeping the peace never got any jobs done. That's your point blank period. So as far as student groups and faculty go, stop trying to say, I want growth. I want growth, but I want it under my circumstances. It doesn't matter what your circumstances are. It's when the people that are oppressed are coming to you and are coming to you with solutions and are coming to you ready to make change, you give them the stage and walk the hell off. Point blank period. So support, sometimes support comes as take my platform and do what you need to do with it. Yeah. Not let me police exactly what you're able to do. And as far as allyship goes, it's the exact same thing. I understand a lot of people, you get the, no, but I love my Black friends. Sick. But if you really, really, really loved your Black friends, you would stop trying to, number one, persuade them that their experiences are not legitimate. Yep. Number two, stop trying to rationalize it as, oh, well, maybe it's not, maybe it could be. There's no maybe. Yep. Just little things like that. Stop trying to mold this growth into something that can only fit under your scope. Yep. So my message to student bodies, people trying to be allies, is stop being inflexible and just be ready to let things change. I almost cussed. Stop. Just be ready to let things change. Oh my Lord.
Yeah, I think I just remembered a quick little story before we get into questions. In high school, I think one of the best experiences I had was actually, of course, it always happens to be my last year of school when things get a little better. But I had this really good friend that I ended up becoming roommates with, and she was white. Well, she's not gone, but she's white.
Can I name drop?
Yes, you can.
Word to Kate, man.
Word to Kate, because Kate was one of the most understanding people. And she was a very big part of me just feeling more comfortable in myself, me feeling more comfortable to, kind of come out of my shell. And just in general, I am, obviously more of an introvert. So like that just naturally, I'm not the one to come out of my shell immediately. But Thanos.
Bars.
Thanos did be speaking.
We're not.
He may have been snapping some snaps.
Hey, Thanos was snapping.
Kate,
yeah, he snapped away some lines.
I'm aware. But Kate was a very big part of just making me feel comfortable. Like anytime, and I think I'm gonna especially highlight hair here because anytime I changed my hair, it wasn't this. I'm not a spectacle, right? Like I'm not at all a spectacle. I'm not like, oh, I'm like a zoo animal when I walked into school sometimes when I would change my hair and it'd be this, different thing than what I used to do. Yeah. But with her, it was just like, oh, cool. Okay. This is, the curls now. You're like, and we just talk about just styling it regularly, right? Just, just normal girl things. It wasn't this whole idea of, oh my God, your hair is this huge spectacle. And I really appreciated that because she didn't treat me like I'm like not in a bad way. She didn't treat me like I was Black. She treated me like a person. And I think that was so important. And it made me feel comfortable coming into university because she also came, to Mac as well. It made me feel more comfortable. It's like, okay, so not everybody's bad, Granted, it was just one person, but it was like, I feel really comfortable with this person. I feel really comfortable in this. And I think that's a really important thing for Black students is that sometimes, like Max said earlier, is we come into these places with a chip on our shoulder because we haven't had a good, even a single good positive experience, right? And that taints everything else. We come in with this attitude in a way that we just don't really want to interact with anybody because we just, like I said, we don't want that disappointment of finding out that everybody is just like the last person. So I think being an ally, you have to understand that we're not putting the responsibility that you are the one that's going to make their life better, but you represent your community.
I agree.
Just like we represent our community. So when you make one thing, it's just the way people's minds work, right? If one person makes a good step, it's like, okay, so maybe I can open up a bit more. And of course, world peace is it's a very difficult, thing, but one action makes a very big difference. One drop in the bucket does make a difference. And I think that is one of the most important things that I can definitely, speak to when it comes to allyship, is that one drop kind of, it kept me kind of above this line of just always being cynical, always coming in with this attitude. And not to say that's a bad thing, because I was there up until I, met Kate and became really good friends with her. It's just how we're wired to be. Is unfortunately, that's just how most people's situations have gone. So I think that is a really important part of allyship that people need to understand, is that not only are you being an ally for the community, but you are being an ally for that individual. Don't just always think of everybody at large. Think of the individual, because that's a person, right? That's not just a number. That is a person. You don't just do it because you want to be part of the community. Do it because you value that specific person.
Yeah, we're not monoliths.
That's a whole different topic.
Yeah.
Before we get into question and answer period, I have one more bar.
Okay. Oh dear.
Out then. The bar is.
I'm loading the clip.
I'm unloading the clip. If you feel the need to analyze and look, please just find a mirror. That's just the last clip.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been great talking to you tonight. I hope you have a great evening.
All right, well.
Wow. Okay. And with that being said,
question.
Yeah.
That being said.